presentation, which is a sermon, as you might know on my sheet. I did preach this about a month and a half ago at First Lutheran Church in Cincinnati, and just adapted it slightly. A reading from Exodus. Then God spoke all these words. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself an idol, whether in the form of anything that is in heaven above, or that is on the earth beneath, or that is in the water under the earth. You shall not bow down to them or worship them. For I, the Lord your God, am a jealous God, punishing children for the iniquity of parents, to the third and the fourth generation of those who reject me, but showing steadfast love to the 1,000th generation of those who love me and keep my commandments. You shall not make wrongful use of the name of the Lord your God, for the Lord will not acquit anyone who misuses his name. Remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the 7th day is a Sabbath to the Lord your God. You shall not do any work. You, your son or your daughter, your male or female slave, your livestock, or the alien resident in your towns. For in 6 days the Lord made heaven and earth, the sea, and all that is in them, but rested the 7th day. Therefore the Lord blessed the Sabbath day and consecrated it. Honor your father and your mother, so that your days may be long in the land that the Lord your God is giving you. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. You shall not covet your neighbor's house. You shall not covet your neighbor's wife, or male or female slave, or ox, or donkey, or anything that belongs to your neighbor. This is the word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God.
Since I've been in seminary, I've driven between Cincinnati and Columbus about once a week. On a good day, it's just over an hour and a half from my house, so it isn't too bad a trip. But the scenery is not too exciting, so it's nice when something breaks the view of the farmlands. In the last segment of the trip, as I get toward Columbus, there's something that always catches my eye. Right along the side of the highway, there's a pair of billboards. If you're driving north toward Columbus, you get a review of the 10 Commandments. And these are serious commandments. It's the old King James language, thou shalt not. They're even written in the old English script. You can just hear God's booming, no-nonsense voice delivering them straight to Moses and the Israelites. No question, these are serious commandments. And if you need any more convincing, when you drive the other direction, from Columbus to Cincinnati, you get another very real message. One billboard says, hell is real. Big letters, hell, printed in red. And the other one poses a question. If you die tonight, where will you spend eternity? These 4 billboards, taken together, I believe are meant to send a very clear message. If you aren't obeying these 10 laws, you're going to hell. I think they want us to be afraid, very afraid. Guilt and fear can be great motivators to obedience. But are they motivators to love? When I think about the relationship God wants with us, with me, I think of God's great love. God created us to be in a divine relationship and to be in relationship with one another. And the last time I thought about the good relationships I have, they weren't based on thundering commandments, but on loving interactions. My relationship with my spouse is based on love and commitment, and it includes standards. There are certain things we expect of one another, certain ways we'll treat one another because of our love. We support one another. We're sexually faithful to one another. We treat one another with kindness and speak well of one another to others. We also forgive one another when the inevitable hurt comes. So there are a couple of things for you to know about the Ten Commandments. First is, the Bible doesn't really even call them commandments. The Hebrew word that's used to describe them can be translated words or statements. I think people started calling them commandments to give them a little more oomph. 10 words doesn't carry so much authority. And we are meant to take them seriously. We also might wonder, why are there 10? The Israelites had so many more laws than just these 10. I know some of you have read Leviticus and Numbers. In fact, they already had lots of these laws before God gave these 10 to Moses in the form that we read today. It might be that this listing is meant to be kind of a summary. And it might be that there are 10 because it makes them easy to remember, since most of us happen to carry around a 10-card device to help us remember things. So there's another thing to think about. Did you notice that the commandments have a negative form? Don't! Here's what you can't do. And at first glance, that might sound pretty negative. We don't like to hear no in our culture. When we're trying to motivate people, whether it's children or employees, students, or anyone else, we try to frame it positively. Instead of saying, don't touch that hot stove, we say, if you touch that hot stove, you'll burn yourself. But if you think about it, that negative statement can actually give us more freedom. God doesn't say, here's what you must do. Instead, God says, you can do anything except these things. As long as we're mindful of those specific things that God has prohibited, we'll be fine. Don't touch the hot stove. Actually tells us that it's okay to touch other things. The cat, the kitchen table, the bottom drawer where the plastic bowls are stored. So what starts out sounding negative can open a world of possibilities to us. As long as we don't turn something else into God, it's all there for us. People to know, places to visit, foods to taste. As long as we keep God first. But I think the most important thing about these 10 commandments, or words, or statements, or whatever we choose to call them, is that God gives them to us as a gift. They are not meant to be a burden or some kind of entrance requirement. In spite of what those I-71 billboards might want us to think, your chance to be a child of God doesn't depend on how well you keep the commandments. Jesus died and rose to take care of that. You are God's child, God's beloved child, whether you keep the commandments or not. Thinking back to my relationship with my spouse, or any close relationship that I have, I don't do those things like treating Jonathan with love and being honest with him so that I can earn his love. I do those things because of our love for one another. But sometimes in relationships, it's a good idea to be very clear about how we treat one another. Most of us like to know what's expected of us. Most of us want to live in a way that pleases God. So God gives us these 10 short, memorable words that give us the confidence to know we're making the right choices, or to let us know when we need to apologize to God and to our neighbor for making the wrong choices. And we know we'll be forgiven, for sure by God, and hopefully by our neighbor too. So if we're going to use these 10 words that God spoke to us, we do have to know what they are. I'm sure that you can name a few, or maybe most of them, but it can be hard to remember all 10. So last year, during internship, I was helping teach a confirmation class, and I learned a great way to remember them, including emotions. So I'm going to show them to you now. Also, if you want to follow along and make sure sure I get it right. Did you know that our ELW worship book has Luther's Small Catechism in the back? If you want to turn to page 1160, you'll find those 10 Commandments right there. So here we are, the 10 Commandments. You'll never forget. 1. There's one God, and God is first. 2. This looks like a V. Don't take the Lord's name in vain. 3. Whether you observe it on a Friday, or a Saturday, or a Sunday, remember the Sabbath. 4. Honor your father and your mother and your grandparents and your step-parents. Honor those in authority. Number 5. Stop the killing. Number 6. Remember, this is for confirmation students. Sounds like sex. Don't commit adultery. Number 7. Don't rob the 7-Eleven or anyone else. Number 8. This one goes visual. Looks like a B. Don't bear false witness. And by the time you get to 9 and 10, all that's left is coveting. Don't covet your neighbor's house and stuff. And don't covet your neighbor's spouse and the people and animals who live with your neighbor. So now you know them. You have a way to remember those 10 Commandments, but the most important thing, the thing I really want you to remember, is that God gives them to us as a gift, as a way to be sure we have the best life we can have, and a way to honor our God and our relationship with God. It's not about being afraid of God, being worried about where we'll spend eternity if we miss one of the commandments, which we surely will, because we're sinful, we can't help it. It's about knowing we're loved by God very, very